And to close out the show, we were talking a lot about NXT Battleground. And I feel like we need to kind of reframe our perspective. And this is something that I kind of had to think about over the weekend, which is like, was the NXT Battleground show surprising because of the product quality that NXT normally presents to us? Or was it surprising because we slept on NXT? And I think it's because we slept on NXT, but I wanted to know your opinion. After NXT rebranded into 2.0, did the wrestling world sleep on NXT?
Most definitely. Um, because yeah, I remember around. How do you want to say this time last year? Was it this time last year? When did they become 2.0? Has it been a year that they? No, it's been longer than that, right? It's been like 2 years that they've
It's
been
been
in
a little bit
2.0.
longer than that. Yeah.
2021, I want to say. Yeah, and honestly, um, all right, here's the issue. When it came to 1.0, there's a certain like pool of people that was into it. You know, people like the rawness of NXT. It was a little bit indie vibes, but it still kind of gave like hues of the old mixed with the new. And I
Mm-hmm.
think people just enjoy the grittiness of 1.0. Whatever they weren't getting out of watching the main roster, they could find that comfort in watching 1.0. And then when it came to the rebrand, and I think around that time, like I think Vince and Bruce Pritchard and some other people that are normally working in the main roster was kind of taking over, the direction of 2.0. It came off too polished and like it was trying too hard to be something, but we didn't quite know what it was. Are you developmental? Are you main roster light? NXT used to have its own identity, and then it
Mm.
just felt like you just watch pretty much 2.0 if you're trying to see the people who are just being prepped to be on the main roster. But I think another thing that also made us feel like crap about watching 2.0 was that we noticed that not only was it not like the comfort of 1.0, but people were getting bought up from 2.0 to the main roster and they were just not being used properly. Like they
Yeah.
became afterthoughts very fast. So it's just like, why am I going to invest in watching this product if you guys aren't going to even follow up with any storylines? You're going to keep up with the way that people were presented there, here.
Mm-hmm.
We could even use Shotzi as an example. Technically, she was there from when it was 1.0, then the switch of 2.0, but they tried like stripping her down as soon as she got there and took away her tank and stuff like that. It was like little things like that I feel like irked us. And it's like, all right, well, why am I going to get myself invested into watching this if it's not going to mean anything in the long run when it gets to where it matters, which is the main roster? But it went through a lot of changes and evolutions. And I don't want to say the pay per views were ever bad for 2.0. The pay per views are actually really good. It's
Yeah.
just the show changing so much. I think it took till now for them to find their stride. Maybe months ago, 'cause I wasn't really watching. But they found like their stride in picking out talents that we enjoy seeing in terms of the tag teams, in terms of like the singles for the men, the single for the women. They kind of found like their crop of people and they finally got a division going, but they finally got like a direction as well. Where it's not as too polished as when they first presented 2.0, but it doesn't feel like it's a performance center. It feels like to me like it's its own brand. But
Yeah.
I watch it and I feel like I'm not really watching WWE. I'm watching like another branch. It's kind of weird,
Yeah.
but they found their footing, and I do agree. We all did sleep on NXT as a whole, so we get shocked every time they knock it out the park. They never had bad wrestlers. They just, again, it was choppy. It was very choppy. It was
Yeah.
unfinished. It was in the drafts. But I feel like now they got a finalized product going and they know what they're doing with it. I don't know if it's because Sean probably has more control because Vince did have his gritty little hands on it,
Yeah.
or if Hunter and him are working collaboration, but something feels different. How do you feel about it?
So I think something that you pointed out that I want to point out as well is that NXT has definitely had a journey, right? when NXT first kind of came out, it was seen as the developmental brand, but then it eventually developed into kind of like WWE's indie, right? A lot of independent wrestlers would come through there to get the little WWE buff and shine and then get
Yeah.
sent to the main roster. And a lot of times it wasn't it like the there was a miscommunication between NXT and then the main roster because
Mhm.
in NXT it felt like an indie. So a lot of guys came in and they didn't really change. They just started hitting music cues. They started like wrestling towards the hard cam. They started being more conscious of WWE's production. But I feel like NXT 1.0 or the NXT that we all fell in love with felt like an indie with WWE production quality. Then they went into NXT 2.0, which was Vince's developmental kind of brainchild in the sense that, like, okay, 1.0, you had this brand that was like for the indie darlings, but we're gonna do stuff that's going to train the next generation of WWE superstars. So I feel like 2.0 was really about creating characters that would end up translating well into WWE's main roster, considering that one of the biggest flaws of 1.0 was that they developed them so well in NXT and they had all these great matches and they were featured in this way.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it didn't translate over to NXT 2.0 or the main roster, I should say. So NXT 2.0 felt a little bit more animated, a little bit more childish, little bit more gimmicky. And I think that that's what turned people off, especially now because it was one of those things. It's like I don't want to watch NXT, and a lot of the guys that I watched NXT for are either on the main roster or they're in AEW. Like Adam Cole went to AEW, Johnny Gargano went to the main roster, Ciampa went to the main roster, Finn Balor's on the main roster. So it's like now there's like a bunch of guys. It's like, well, the reasons why I used to watch NXT are either on the main roster or they're in AEW. So I feel like there was this heavy fall off between 1.0 and 2.0 because it felt very, very gimmicky, childish, even down to like the color and the aesthetics. It felt a lot
Yeah.
more like it had the rainbow stuff, and it felt like Nickelodeon had having a
A
wrestling promotion,
collaboration.
if you
Yeah.
will. Yeah, literally, it felt like a cross promotion of Nickelodeon and WWE. Obviously, you had some bright spots, one of those bright spots being Mandy Rose and Toxic Attraction, but it was still very I'm not sure about this, I don't know. And then when I feel like when they cuz during that time Bruce Pritchard got brought in, who works very, very closely with Vince McMahon on a lot of wrestling related stuff. Once Vince retired, you saw NXT kind of begin making this transition into a brand that had a lot more balance. It was like we're going to retain the good parts of 1.0 and we're going to retain the mission of 2.0 and we're going to create like the white and gold. And that's the reason why you see like guys like the Creed brothers who were kind of developed in 2.0 have like these banger of a match because now that I feel like they're given the freedom that 1.0 kind of had a little bit, and yet they still got the polish of 2.0 to kind of create this. So I feel like they've struck a balance now, but I feel like between 2.0 and now there was such a fall off of fans that a lot of people slept. And it was like you said, they never had bad wrestlers. They never really had bad shows. But because we didn't see what we wanted to see, we just like, well, I'm just gonna go where all my favorites are. And then that's what led people kind of flocking. But I'm gonna tell you something. Cats slept on NXT because the product that they have now is actually perfect, in my opinion. I think that this is the perfect balance between a little bit of indie, a little bit of main roster polish, a little bit of the NXT UK stuff. It's all kind of blended up into like this nice little sweet, sweet medley. And it's like really, really nice. And it's just perfect. But I think that wrestling slept on NXT mostly because of honestly the AEW effect. Once like they started kind of competing in ratings and stuff like that, I feel like people were like, "Oh, well, AEW gets more ratings, and my faves are either being misutilized on the main roster or are in
Yeah.
AEW." It's like people kind of just stopped paying attention. So But I do think wrestling fans slept on NXT, and that's the reason why Battleground was such a big surprise to people, because they were like, "How is this better than NXT?" But it's just, I mean, how is this better than AEW? But it's like, if you've been
You,
watching NXT, you know why.
do you
Keep
expect
going
more
though.
viewers after this?
A little bit, but not a lot, because I still feel like other sports, wrestling is very star driven. So whatever has the most stars is going to have the highest viewership. I feel like you're gonna see a little bit of boost in NXT, like, oh, they're actually really, really good, which they've always been good. But I feel like now I feel like they're just like, I don't know, they're just kind of like in this weird limbo. I feel like they need to pull like a uh if they not so that they can go back to where they were before, but if they were to pull like one really, really notable star that was big on the indies, I feel like they're going to garner a lot more interest. But even without like the indie superstar, I feel like that they would only do that for the sake of viewership. I don't think they need it for the quality of the program. Like, Mello is doing his thing right now. I love what Wes Lee is doing. Even last night, like on last night's NXT, Ali was there. I thought that that was interesting.
Oh yeah, I saw a
Bear,
report about that. What did he do?
yeah, he was there. He was there, and he was like present during the North American title match. That
Oh,
intrigues
okay.
me.
That's
That
cool.
intrigues me.
Yeah.
Wes Lee, Tyler Bate, Mustafa Ali in a North American title match. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Baron Corbin
Okay.
and Baron Corbin attacked Mello last night, and even though he hasn't had the hottest main roster run, he was phenomenal in NXT. That lone wolf character was some of
Yeah.
his best work. And
Hmm.
so now kind of seeing him back on NXT, I'm interested in that as well. So I don't think that they need an indie star, because I feel like the stuff that they have already is quality. I don't think they need it for quality. I just think they just need it just for the a little boost in viewership.
I
What are you
think they
gonna
should
say?
have some people bleed onto the main roster, but I feel like it's two things. I feel like
Mm,
a they need to do a little more cross promoting with like
mm,
maybe just dabbling or making some small appearances of people from NXT onto the main roster, maybe on Raw, considering
okay.
Raw is super long and usually they have 1 hour worth of filler. I mean, I don't think it would kill them to show their champions and stuff like that. Because Tiffany has such a gravitating look, because a lot of people like that look
Yes.
already. Like, it wouldn't take very much to do a little itty bitty segment with her or something, or showcase the matches from the pay per view onto um, the WWE show so that like people actually would care to watch. But I also think
Mm,
that some of the great talents, or talents that would normally have been pushed into our faces, are injured right now, and once they come back, it's going
true.
to pick up a little bit. Like I referenced before, Sol Roca and Nikita, they were white hot. Obviously, like you could tell that regardless when they come back, they're going to get a push. But people like that, I feel like, are going to pull in more viewers because Nikita has that look that everyone will like. Even people who don't watch wrestling are going to look at Nikita and be interested and raise an eyebrow. But Sol Roca is just so like interesting. I feel like once they start, these people start coming back to. I feel like things are gonna speed up, but they need to just do a little bit of just give me like a teardrop of worth of just promo of 2.0 because it's going in the right direction. It just doesn't have the numbers to back it up. Is all.
Right.
Yeah,
That makes sense for sure. I just had to check my notes to see if I had anything
you're
else
all good. We've been
to
running
add.
for nearly 2 hours
We've
now.
been running for a good 2 hours now, but I think that that's it for today. But we want to know we want to know your take on NXT. Has the wrestling world at large slept on NXT? But that concludes our